What is up? Jack here with DevSlopes.com. Welcome back to our API course and welcome back to the DevSlopes Southern Command Center. Last lesson we talked about some arrays, and this lesson we're going to talk about array helpers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So typically we dealt with iterating through arrays with for loops. So let's just take a look at an array here. So we'll just say 32, 49, 54, and 58. Alright, standard array. Now then, if the old way of doing it, we could say, I'm going to log this just so we can keep them separated. If I can type. So we would normally use a for loop to iterate through this array. And the way we would do it is we'd say for, and then var x equals 0, x is less than array.length x plus plus. And then we could do something with each element. So we could just say console.log and then x. And if I print that, or if I save it, node model right over here, and you see we get a for loop. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, we need to get the element of the array, not the index. So if I save it, you see here we get 32, 49, 54, 58. All well and good. Now this syntax is a little clunky. It feels a little old. You're declaring a variable for the index here, and then you're checking a condition, and then you're iterating. It's a lot of code to type. There's a better way with array helpers. And so the first one we want to look at is for each. So the way for each works is all we've got to do is say array dot and then for each. And then in parentheses, we're going to pass a function in here. And the value keyword that I put here, that could be anything. That it walks through, and every time it comes across an element, it sticks it in this right here. This could be array element or whatever you want it to be. And then here we could just say console.log. If I save that, NodeMon runs over here, and you see in our for each loop, we get the same results. Like I said, the name of this doesn't matter. It's just what it's assigning with each iteration through the array. So that is for each. And you know, I would think, or I say anyway, in my opinion, the for each syntax is a lot cleaner than using this for loop here. There's a lot of chance for typos and things to go wrong in this for loop. This for each method, I think it's a lot cleaner syntax. We could take this a step further before we move on. And we could use our fat arrow function. So you can see here that with our fat arrow function, we dramatically, we put everything on one line. So we passed in our value here, and actually we could even get rid of these parentheses. So we've got our value here, we've got our fat arrow, and then our statement. And it's just a single statement, so we could put all this on one line. And when I save it, let me break this apart here. So now you can see we've got our for each fat arrow. It does the exact same thing. So in my opinion, this syntax here is a lot cleaner than this, and this is a whole lot cleaner than doing this old for loop here. So let's go ahead and average up some grades here real quick. Let me console.log again to keep this split out. So we'll declare another array called grades. And we'll just say 98, 87, 90, or 82, 74, 89, 87. Okay. And then we can declare a variable here for a sum. So let sum equal 0. And then we can loop through this with a for each loop. And we can say grade, and we'll use our fat arrow function here again, and we can say sum plus equals grade. Then we can say let average equal sum divided by grades.length. Then we can console log our average is average. And if I save that, you see here we get our average is 86.166666667. Now we can even fix that, is we can add on a method here called toFixed and pass in 1. And if we save it, you see we get our average is 86.2. Now the toFixed, you can add that on to any number, and whatever value you pass in here, it will round to that many decimal places. So in our case, we just want it to go 1. We could change that to 0 and get our average is 86. So that's pretty cool. The for each helper method is a really nice helper method, and I use it quite often. So let's move on and let's look at the map helper. So with a map helper, we're going to iterate through an array and perform some operation on each element. Now, map is one of the most commonly used helper methods. So again, we're going to look at a for loop here. I'm going to go ahead and comment out all this we've already done. So we could say let array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we could say let add 1 equals a new empty array. Now the reason I'm going to do the empty add 1 array is because I'm going to perform some operation on each one of these elements, and I'm going to stick it in a new array. I'm not going to mutate the data. If there's one thing you learn in programming, it's best to avoid mutating data when possible, especially in an array. So with our old for method of doing it, we could say for let x equals 0, x is less than array.length, x plus plus. And then here we could just say add 1.push, and then inside push we could say array sub x plus 1. So all we're doing here is we're looping through each element in this array we're going to add 1 to the value and then push it onto this add 1 array. So then down here we could say console.log add 1 and see what we wind up with. So if I save that and nodemon reruns, you see we get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We added 1 to each element and we get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's with the for loop. Now we can look at with the map helper. So we could say let, and I'm going to declare a new array here. Add 1 map equals array.map. And then we've got another function here. I'm going to type out the es6 way of doing it first. And if I save that, you'll see here we get the same result. So our add 1 map array is now identical to our add 1 array, but we use the map function right here to do our work for us. Now we could take this and use our es6 fat arrow functions and make it even cleaner. So we could get rid of all that and we could just say value fat arrow and then value +1. And if I save it, you see we get the identical result. So the map helper is very cool. es6 fat arrows make it even cooler. So before we move on from map, let's go ahead and take a look at one more example. So let's go back and let's look at our vehicle object that we've been looking at in previous lessons. So we'll just say let vehicles equals, and we're going to make an array of vehicles here. And these are just vehicle objects. And we'll just go ahead and type them out here. And to shorten things up, I'm just going to copy this and we'll paste it twice. And then I'm going to change some of the properties here. Okie dokie. Now then, we've got our array of vehicle objects here. So say if we wanted to create an array just to pull out certain properties out of these arrays, out of these objects. One way we could do that is we could create a new array called models. And then we could take our vehicles array and map. And then we could take a vehicle and our fat arrow function and just return the vehicle.model. Then if we console.log models, you see over here we get Ram 1500, Charger RT, and Rogue. So map lets us take an array of objects and pull out just one property out of that, or we could pull multiple properties out or whatever. It's pretty cool. So that's just another little example with using map. Let's go ahead and move on to some more helper methods. So the next helper method we want to look at is filter. And the filter method does exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to filter out only certain elements in an array. So using our vehicles objects, array of vehicle objects up here, let's go ahead and set up a use case for filter. So again, we're going to create a new array. So we'll say let filtered vehicles equals vehicles dot filter, and we're going to use the es6 fat arrow function here again. Same kind of syntax. Our parameter is the vehicle. That's what's getting passed in with every iteration. And then we pass in here vehicle.make and triple equals, and let's just say Dodge. Now what that's going to do is it's going to look at every element passed into this vehicle variable here. And if the vehicle.make is equal to Dodge, it's going to add it. Otherwise it's not. So if we console.log here, filtered vehicles, we should get the objects back that are just make of Dodge. And you see here we do indeed get two back. We get the Ram 1500 and the Charger RT back. So that's pretty cool. Filter again is just a way to pull out objects that meet a certain criteria. And if we want to use it without es6 fat arrow functions, I'll show you that real quick. Got to have our return statement in there if we're not using a fat arrow function. So if I save it, we get the exact same results. We get the Ram 1500 and the Charger RT. Now continuing on, let's go ahead and look at the find helper method. And I'm going to do this first one without using the es6 fat arrow function, and then we'll do it with. But basically the way we could do it is we could say let vehicle equals vehicles dot find and then inside there we could just say return vehicle dot make triple equals Nissan. And if I save that, you see we get back the object that has the Nissan in it. We could change this to Dodge. And you see here, we just get one object back. So the difference in find and filter is is going to bring back all of the elements that match the criteria, where find is going to get the first element that matches the criteria and stop. So this is the ES5 method or way of doing it. So the ES6 fat arrow function is very similar. And that's all there is to it. I'll save that and we get back our Nissan object. Let's do a little bit more complicated example here. So we've got our vehicles array of objects up here. Let's Let's create another object called truck driver. And then inside here, we're going to say vehicle ID is 2. And inside of our vehicles up here, we're going to give them an ID property. So we're going to say vehicle ID is 1 because our truck is our ID 1 vehicle here. And then we're going to say name is equal to Jack. All right. So we've got our vehicles array of objects, and then we've got our truck driver object here. And I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to come down here. Actually, I'm going to comment out all this. And we're still doing find here. So, a little bit more complex example. We're going to get the driver for the vehicle. So we're going to create a new function called driver for vehicle. And we're going to pass in vehicles and driver. And that's our objects. That's our array of vehicles and our truck driver object. Okay, inside there, we're going to do return vehicles.find. And then we're going to say return vehicle.id is triple equal to driver.vehicle ID. So we've got our find function here that we're operating on this vehicles array. We're iterating over each one, looking at the vehicle object for each iteration. And then when the vehicle ID is equal to the driver.vehicle ID, we're returning it. So to call this, all we've got to do is just say let driver equal driver for vehicle, pass in our vehicles object array, and pass in our truck driver object. Then we can console.log driver. And it's vehicles.find right there. Okay. So if I save that, our driver is driving this Dodge Ram 1500. So we loop through this and we use a truck driver object and a vehicles object, array of objects. And we look through each one, and when the vehicle ID was equal to the driver.vehicle ID, we returned that vehicle. So we got back this one single object here. Now to do this without, with the fat arrow functions, it's real similar. And then here we can just say return vehicles.find save that, and we get the same result. We get our Dodge Ram 1500. So that's a little bit more complicated example. Find makes it pretty cool to be able to find things. All right, so let's move on. Let's look at our next helpers. And we're going to look at every and some. So with every, we can take a look at an array and see if every element meets some condition. So we've got our array of objects up here, and we've got this is four-wheel drive Boolean property. So we can use every and some to check those values. So you see here we get false. So in this case, we're using the every helper. And what this does is we're looping through that array of objects right here, and we're looking at the is four-wheel drive property. Now what every does is it makes sure that all of the elements in the array meet the condition. In this case, they don't, so we get back false. To use fat arrow functions, we can do something similar. Let me comment this out. And that's essentially the same thing as this code up here. So that's every. So let's take a look at sum. So it's basically the same code that we've got here, except obviously we're going to use sum instead of every. So we've got sum, and we're doing the same thing here. And we'll console.log our sum four-wheel drive. If we save it, we get true. Because not all are four-wheel drive, but we do have one that's four-wheel drive. So sum of the elements in the array are four-wheel drive. And again, with es6 fat arrow functions, same kind of thing. Save it, and we get the same result. All right. So the last helper we're going to look at is reduce. And reduce is used quite a bit. Reduce lets you iterate through an array and maybe keep a running sum of all the elements in the array or something like that. First up, we're going to look at the way you would have done this before using reduce. So we're going to say let grades equal, and let me make sure I don't have that. Okay. Actually, let's just copy this here. And we'll paste it in right here. So we've got our grades. We need a sum. So we'll start at 0. So the way we would have done this in the past is we would say let x equal 0. X is less than grades.length x plus plus. And then inside there, we would just say sum plus equals grades sub x. And then we could console.log sum. And you see here our sum is 517. We could, of course, do something like sum equals sum. And then we could console.log our average is sum divided by grades dot length dot to fixed 1. And if we save that, you see here the sum is 517. Our average is 86.2. Now let's take a look at how we would do this with reduce. So, with reduce, we could say let total equals grades.reduce, and then pass in a function with two parameters, sum and grade. Now sum is going to be the running total of what we're doing here, and then the grade is going to be each element in the array. So we're going to start sum off at 0. And the way we do that is after this curly brace down here, we put a comma and then a 0. And that 0 is going to be the starting value for sum. So if we already had some amount that we wanted to start with, we would change this 0 to whatever that amount was. So in here, all we're going to do is just say return sum plus grade. And save that. And then we could just say console.log total equals total. And then we could say our average is total divided by grades dot length dot to fixed. Save it, and you see here again we get total of 517 and our average is 86.2. Pretty cool stuff. Again, instead of using that old school for loop, we can use reduce to take care of this. And now we can do the same thing with a fat arrow function. Let me comment this out, and we'll look at how to do that right now. So we could say let total equals grades dot reduce, and then since we do have two parameters here, we need parentheses. So sum and grade, and then we have our fat arrow, and we're going to go ahead and use curly braces here because we've got that parameter that we've got to start sum off with. But basically we just say return sum plus grade. And then we need to go ahead and be sure and put our starting value there. So if we save that, you see we get the same result. Total is 517, average is 86.2. So we went over quite a few array helper methods here that are now available that make writing code a lot cleaner. To me, it's a lot better syntax than old school for loop. And there's a bunch of them that you can use for different purposes. So anyway, that's our brief overview of array helper methods. Let's go ahead and move on and look at something else. See you in the next lesson.